The idea of throwing a few ingredients into a box, pressing a button, and getting fresh, preservative-free bread sounds like a dream. There are two wet, oh my God. If we go, it's hot. The price tag on most bread machines is more like a nightmare. So instead, I bought the cheapest machine I could find online and we're putting it to the test. Will it really save me money compared to store-bought bread? Is it gonna walk off my counter like so many are claiming? Is the recipe book any good? Is it gonna leave a surprise inside my bread? And at last, is a bread machine really worth it? Hold up. Okay, I think this is the top of the box. We're gonna unbox this and see what's inside. I'm honestly so excited because I've never used a bread machine before. I'm one of those skeptics that's more like, no, I can make my own by hand. I don't need any fancy equipment. But for the price of this bread machine, if it really works, that would be amazing. Ooh. I'm seeing inside the box is the manual for the bread machine. Let's see if I can get this out. Okay. Whew. Okay, there's nothing else in the box, so it's just this guy. Before I reveal the gorgeous bread machine in here, this is the manual. This is where we're gonna find all of the recipes for all of the breads that we can make in here. So without further ado, oh, there's Kate. This is the cheapest bread machine that I could find on the market. It was under $100, believe it or not. There was nothing lower than that, which honestly seems absurd, but let's see if this can really live up to the hype. At first glance, the machine honestly looks better than I expected. I will say the material is plastic and it's pretty light, but besides that, it looks really good. And it's got a bunch of features here from basic to gluten-free, whole wheat bread, and even jam and yogurt. You're telling me this thing is gonna make me yogurt? We'll see. Let's get in here and see what's going on. The first thing we have are the measuring cups, along with the paddle and, oh, this is for taking the bread out, the little hook. And I've heard the paddle ends up in some places it's not supposed to be like inside my bread, but we'll see if that's true. The other thing that's got me a little bit worried is that a lot of people are saying on the very first use of this machine, it lets out toxic fumes, which is not an ingredient I like to include in my bread. So let's see if that's true. Oh, you gotta turn it. Okay. This is the bucket, so the bread is gonna bake in here. It seems like it's gonna be baking pretty tall compared to like long-wise, which is how we bake in a loaf pan. So we'll see how this bread compares to the typical bread that I make at home. So I'm gonna get this all cleaned up and turned on, and then we're gonna try a basic bread recipe to see if it's actually gonna bake us some bread. I have heard that the recipes from the book don't always work, so we'll see if that's true. According to the manual, the first thing we have to do is put everything in and let the machine run empty for 10 minutes to get rid of those toxic fumes that I mentioned. So I'm glad they addressed that. That's pretty good. And after this, we're gonna make a 2-pound loaf, which the two options are 1.5 or 2-pound loaf, and we're really gonna push the machine to its limits and see if it's gonna rise way too much for the 2-pound loaf. As soon as the bucket and the paddle right here, and we can turn on the machine, and then we're just one step away from baking our bread. And I think that is ready to go. So I'm gonna press the start button, and that's it. Let it go for 10 minutes. Let's see if the toxic fumes are gonna come in. If you have a dog, they probably will not like this machine. Come here, Marley. It's okay. It's okay. Maybe he's smelling the toxic fumes. Okay, so it's been 10 minutes. No toxic fumes so far, and it has not walked off my counter. It's still standing, so that's pretty good, but we'll see how it holds up once we put the actual dough ingredients in here and we start baking some bread. So there's a few things that the manual did want us to remember for when we're making our bread, and that is to put the wet ingredients in first and then put the flour on top and then make a little well for the yeast, so that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna start with my water. The water should be warm, and we need 340 milliliters of water, which is gonna be almost 1.5 of these cups that they provided themselves. So that's 200 milliliters. Oops. You always have to look at it from eye level to make sure that it's the right amount. And this is another 140, which brings us up to 340 milliliters. Our next ingredient is oil. And one thing I found about the manual is that it doesn't really tell me what kind of oil to use. It just says oil. So I'm using olive oil because that's just what I like to put in my breads. And we're doing 3 tablespoons of olive oil. Those are our 2 wet, oh my God. Okay, not a great start. Those are our 2 wet ingredients, and then we're gonna put the dry ingredients right on top. That's 2 and 3, and now I'm gonna get something to clean this up because I don't wanna mess up the machine's chances of succeeding. So now we're doing 3½ cups of flour, and the machine did mention that if we go, oh my God, I don't know what is with me today. If we do go over the amount of 3½ cups, which is about 490 milliliters, then there's a very good chance the machine will overrise and overflow, so we won't do that. We'll make sure that our flour is measured just the right amount. So that's 1. We're always making sure to fluff our flour when we're putting it into our machine and never shake the cup so that we're actually getting the right measurement. And the other option is to use a scale if you want to be very precise, but I honestly do not have that kind of time. And that's 2, 3. Okay, this is so weird. The measuring cup has 1/8, no, what is this? 1/8 of a cup, 1/3 of a cup, 2/3 of a cup, and 1 cup, but it doesn't have half of a cup, even though you need 3½ cups. So, okay, whatever. That's a little weird. We're gonna call that about half of a cup. And that's all of the flour that we need. Our last 3 ingredients are sugar, salt, and yeast. So we're gonna do 1 teaspoon of salt with their little teaspoon tool here. We're going to do 3 tablespoons of sugar, which to me sounds like a lot of sugar, but we're following their recipe today, so if they say so, we're going to do it. 2, and that's 3. And one thing that they did tell us to remember is to make a well in the dry ingredients and add the yeast in. Make sure it does not touch the wet ingredients. That's what we're going to do. I'm just going to clean this off because it's kind of gross and I want to add my yeast in clean. Our last ingredient is yeast. We're doing 1 teaspoon, and they didn't really mention if I'm supposed to use instant yeast, active dry yeast, or bread machine yeast, but I'm using instant yeast because that's what I have, so hopefully that works. I'm going to pour that right on top. And that's everything. So apparently right now, if I just turn on this machine, then in a few hours, I'm going to have bread, and I don't have to do anything else. We'll see if that's really true. And just to address the concerns of everyone who says this walks off the counter, I'm going to be taping it in place to see if it really does move. So we're making a box around the bread machine, so if it moves, we'll know. The machine does have a few settings for the color of the crust that you want, and I think the size of the loaf. So you have to put in the size of the loaf and the color of the crust. I'm going to do a nice medium because I like my crust a little darker. I want it to do dark, but I'm a little worried that it'll get too brown. So we'll start with medium and see how it goes. Okay, so to start the machine, we're going to press cycle. I don't know why nothing's happening. Stop. Okay, that's not working. Let's go back to the manual. Okay, it says to stop altogether, we have to hold the start button for 2 seconds, so that's our mistake. Okay, so I'm gonna put the cycle on, oh no, okay. If you miss it, you have to go again. So I'm putting it on number 1, which is the basic bread that we did, so that's number 1. The loaf is gonna be on 2 pounds, and the color is already set to medium, so we won't have to press this button right here. I don't know what this one does, because I thought this was the cycle, but this is the menu. So we're just gonna press start. And that's it. The little window is honestly a little dark. I don't think it has a light, so it's kind of hard to see in there. I'm more just seeing my own reflection, but that's okay. I'm gonna go get myself a little cleaned up because I did make a little bit of a mess. Hopefully when we come back, the machine is still on the counter, it hasn't walked off, and we have some fresh baked bread. It's been almost an hour. So the machine says there's 2 hours left, and when we started it was 3. So it's been almost an hour and it just stopped kneading the dough, which is kind of insane to me because I don't knead for more than like 5 to 10 minutes. But now the machine is pretty warm and I think it's letting the dough rise until it's done, and then it's gonna bake it. So I guess in 2 hours we'll have fresh bread. I'm so excited. I'm excited to see how it turns out. And while we wait, I'm gonna do a little bit of cleanup because I made a huge mess today. Despite this having to be like a very easy, no mess recipe, somehow I still made a mess. So let's clean it up. Oh my God. Okay, it's fully risen. What? Okay, I think we're really pushing the boundaries of the machine here. It's risen all the way to the top. Like over the top. We're lucky this didn't overflow, and there's like steam coming out. I guess it's baking it right now. There's 59 minutes left, so in 59 minutes we're gonna have a loaf of bread. We'll see. I'm still skeptical, but I'm hopeful now. It seems like there's a lot of air bubbles on the surface, so I'm kind of just, no, I shouldn't touch it. Let's let it do its thing. It's been 3 hours, the bread machine just turned off, and at first glance, my house smells like fresh baked bread, not toxic fumes. And as you can see, the bread has stayed within the tape that we set up. So check and check. We're on a really good path so far, but the most important test is the bread that's actually inside the machine. So let's see if we have a fresh baked, really good crumb loaf. Oh my God. Okay, so we're looking at the bread right now. It has not overflown. It's just filled the little basket that the bread is supposed to be baked in. And so far the crust is looking, I don't know. Let's pull it out and see how it actually looks. This is my little handy tool for pulling out the bread, even though, oh yeah, that is hot. Okay, don't touch it. Oh, we have to turn, okay, maybe I'll use the oven mitts. Turn and then pull it out. So okay, maybe this tool is not actually that handy. I think just use oven mitts to get it out. And then I'm gonna dump it out onto my cutting board, and let's see how this loaf actually looks. And the basket is supposed to be non-stick, so moment of truth. Oh my God, what is that in my bread? Okay, so looks like one of the reviews was right. There's a little surprise in my loaf of bread. That is the paddle that is supposed to be kneading my bread, and now it's inside my bread. Let's pull it out. Ah, it's hot. So let's take it out. If the crumb is still good, we'll at least give the machine points for that. Okay, I'm gonna use my mitt. Okay, that's an ingredient I did not plan to include in my bread. I'm gonna let this cool down, but at first glance, I'm not that hopeful. It feels a little bit soft, like it might be undercooked on the inside, but I'm not gonna give up on the machine yet. I'm gonna cut into it and see if it's actually undercooked or if it has a nice crumb. Before we cut into this bread, as promised, I crunched the numbers to see if it's really worth it to buy a bread machine or if it makes more sense to buy it from the store. And the numbers may shock you. So, a 2-pound loaf of bread is going to cost you $3.85 on average at the grocery store, and that's probably going to include additives, preservatives, and the lower end of quality of ingredients. On the other hand, our homemade loaf of bread cost, drumroll please, $3.33, and this is using organic flour, top quality ingredients, and even the best olive oil. So now that we've crunched the numbers, it really just comes down to what's inside this loaf. So I can't wait any longer. Let's cut into it and find out if this bread machine actually bakes some bread. And if you do want to test this machine out for yourself, I'll leave the link for the machine in the bio. And now the moment of truth, let's cut into this loaf. Honestly, I'm so skeptical. And the verdict is that technically looks like a loaf of bread. I will say the crust is very dense and it probably could have used a little bit more time to cool. I'll leave the machine linked in the bio if you want to try it out for yourself. And if you don't want to use a bread machine, this recipe will teach you how to make a loaf without any equipment required.